Absolutely, yeah. I that idea of, you know, I went through I went through a lot of stuff. I went through a a period of abusive marriage where I my autism got weaponized. And it was pretty bad. Um, and then, I got divorced and I found a lady in last year, or not last year, in 2024, who ended up passing away early last year. And I caught myself thinking, like, uh just or at least not recently, but I've been thinking about this for quite a while now, where there's been a lot of grief, and loss, in at least in my life and your life too, and I'm sure in many other people's lives, where I there comes a moment where, the emergency's over, the crisis is over, and, you have that idealized, and sometimes it has passed, and there's that idealized version of being better or fixed, or, having your crisis be over in some sense, but and you're stronger and feeling better and healed. But there's that missing middle of in between where you don't even know. I don't even know if I'm doing things right, or I don't even know where I'm going, and what that even looks like to be fixed and healed, and so yeah, I was just wanting to have a discussion around that and see how you've managed and how I'm managing, and maybe it can help other people that are in that weird missing middle transition of healing to get to where they want to be.
Hmm, I love it, man. Yeah, I think that's a great thing to talk about. I think it's something that a lot of people who have suffered some kind of, not even just a loss, but some kind of profound change, which I think there's always loss associated with change. I've experienced. So I'm curious. One thing you said that I'd love to hear more about is the idea of fixed or healed. Like, I mean, how do you think it would influence, what you're describing as the middle if there was no such like I, like you're what if there's no endpoint, or
A- And that's the thing I'm realizing a little bit, is that uh I don't think there'll ever be an endpoint. Like, how do you recover from deep psychological abuse? How do you recover from a loss of a family member, like your daughter, or um, and being fixed or healed doesn't really erase what happened, and you'll never be the person you're gonna be. But maybe it that burden, or that backpack, becomes a lot easier to carry, and you just become stronger. So
Mm.
think I don't think that they're ever just get better at, and stronger at carrying that weight.
Mm. I mean, I think for me, like, I try to be really intentional about, I'm not saying this like what I'm about to say. I'm not saying I'm always successful at it, but I try to be really intentional about the words that I use, because whether it's my internal dialogue or what comes out of my mouth, because our reality is like the words, like the language we use doesn't so much describe our reality, it defines it. And so, like when I think of things like, you know, fixed or recovered, or or even the idea of never being those things, I don't know, I don't even think about it. I don't really think about it like that. I think of more like, instead of, you know, having some endpoint that I have reached or may never reach, I just think about my experience in the moment. So like for me, I have felt happy, or you know, probably for like a couple of months. So it's been 3.5 years since my daughter died, and I've noticed that I felt happy, like happier, than I have in the last 3.5 years. And so I don't care if that means I'm healed or fixed. I mean, I don't care. I'm just grateful that I've felt happiness and lightness that I haven't felt much of, you know, in what feels like a pretty long time. You know,
And I don't know, I was just thinking that maybe that, becomes our endpoint then. It's like, how do we become just happier, given our context? And I know being happier is possible, at least way more possible than being fixed, or, um, or fully healed. I think you're always gonna be in that transition of healing and being happier, right? You're never gonna be fully happy, and you're not gonna be fully healed. And I don't know, that's what came to mind.
yeah.
I tend to overthink a lot, and I think that becomes my issue.
Well, how would you just like? So, I mean, if you were to describe, you lost your person. Remind me what her name was. I'm sorry. It's just as I'm
Uh,
having a senior moment.
yeah, her name was Katie.
Yeah. So you lost Katie in 2024. So how would you describe like your experience today?
Um, at least carrying that, like, um, I went from, like, really I still mourn her a lot because, uh, she was one of those people that, like, really truly saw me for me, and, like, I've never been, like, happier, and it's, so now it's like, okay, like, sadly, she passed away. We weren't even dating that long, and, um, but I think more so I'm just trying to answer the why. Like, I've accepted the fact that she died. I accepted, you know, um, that it is what it is. But what I struggle with is, why did it happen to such a great person and to such a great family, right? It's,
Mm.
where's uh, that cosmic sense of humor can be a little morbid sometimes, and I'm just wondering, uh I'm just often just asked why. Why did it happen?
What do you? Yeah. Interesting. I mean, what do you? I wonder. Well, you said you struggle. I mean, you said you struggle with why. Like, what do you mean by struggle? I guess is.
Uh, just I struggle with finding the answer to why, right? Um, and I guess I'll never find it. I'll never find the reason why it happened. Um, and that I think that's like, fully me consistently pondering the why, the reason behind it, uh, prevents me from fully accepting the fact that it happened, and, uh, like, just moving on, whatever that
Mm.
means. Like I and by moving on, I just mean moving forward, because, like, I'll never forget the impact that she's had on me, and, that she taught me to relive again. So
Mhm.
I'll always be grateful for that gift, but, okay, so how do I move forward now? How do I become happier now? And then how do I, um how do I embrace the next person that my heart lands on, without comparing?
Well, it's interesting you brought that up because that's what I was wondering about. Like I wonder because and for people that don't know your backstory, I'm not going to try to tell it on your behalf, obviously, but you and I have had some conversations, and I know one of the things with Katie was that as someone who's dealt with or deals with autism. I don't know how you say it, whether you call yourself autistic or whatever, but like, it's been obviously a huge part of your life. I know that, in our conversations before, you've talked about how on the outside you've often felt like very different from most people, how isolating that has been. You've been in a very toxic marriage, and then you probably for one of the first times in your life, maybe the first time in your life, you found someone who gets you, saw you and accepted you for who you are. I mean, like, I can't like that. Like, can't even imagine. Like, well, I can imagine it because you've described it, but I mean, like, I think it's important to acknowledge just how powerful that meaningful must have been for you. And I guess what I'm curious about is like, is whether, and I'm just thinking out loud right now, so I'm curious for your reaction about this. But when you're, obsessing about or think, I'm not, maybe you're not obsessing, but thinking about the why, I wonder if the real, how much what's going on is the real question that under there is like, how am I going to find that again? Because it's only happened once.
Um, I guess it it certainly wasn't the first time.
Mm.
Um, but now I'm like I'm old now. I'm 41, so I feel old. But so yeah, so I think that question does become relevant of like, will I find this again, or will I always be condemned uh to being alone now? But you know, like they say, it's uh the good things happen when you like. I certainly, when I met Katie, I was not wanting to date. Literally between the time I met her and uh time my wife left, it was just 4 months. I The only reason I met her is because I was walking my dog. I saw my friend at the pool that she was sitting with, and I just went over to say hi with, like, no intention. I went to say hi to my friend. And then we just hit it off, and, uh, so I think it will happen again. It's just maybe I'm impatient.
Mm. Yeah. Hard, man. I mean, I think something you said, like what I've been thinking about since your text was, the whole idea of identity. Uh, because so for me, and I've written about this, but you know, I really uh, fancied myself quite the great dad and quite an expert on being a dad. That was a big part of my identity. Number one, it was like it's. I mean, it obviously still is, but it always has been and is something that is still incredibly important to me. Number two, I run a business where I coach dads. Like, I mean, that's one of the things that I do to make a living. So we have a group coaching program for dads who are business owners, and we help them develop better relationships with their kids and their wives while continuing to run successful businesses. And so in this group, people really see me as like some kind of parenting expert, and I think that in a lot of ways I really bought into that identity. Like, I mean, it was important to me. It's kind of like my life's work, I suppose. And then my 19-year-old daughter, um, I racked with mental health issues, and driving drunk and stoned, and killed herself and almost killed four other people. And like, I think, like, you want to talk about like some fucking parenting turned out to be, and that identity, uh, that violent identity destruction, let's say, or rearranging, it's very, I mean, it's super confronting at the time. Like, but I think it's turned out to be just a huge gift, a huge, huge gift in the sense that it has made me much more humble. And I don't think I was an arrogant person before, but I just have like a much clearer or stronger sense of humility, than before. I think that I've really come to accept the limits my own ability to influence the trajectory of other people. Like, and that's not me like saying I'm powerless or anything like that. Like, I have a tremendous amount of power over myself and a much less, much more limited sense of power and influence over other people. So I think that like that identity that it was really hard, man. Like, how am I gonna even go back to this group? But these guys still, what are they gonna think of, like, did this happen to me? Like, all these stories I told myself, none of which turned out to be they all turned out to be made up, but yeah, I mean, in the end, I think we get very emotionally invested in how we see ourselves and how the stories we tell ourselves about how other people see us, and it's really freed me from a lot of that, and, that's one thing I'm actually really grateful for.
I'm I'm wondering, and forgive my forgive my ignorance, but,
Mm.
uh, like, what what's the, uh when you framed it as, like, some coach dad or dad coach I am, like, uh, what what, what charge are you bringing against yourself, or what charge did you bring against yourself?
Well, the charge I brought, yeah, I think I don't know if it was a charge I brought against myself. That's an interesting way to put it. I mean, maybe it was. I think it's that I'm supposed to be a good dad, and look, I couldn't save my own kid. Like,
Mm,
and um, yeah, and I mean, I teach dads how to have good relationships with their kids, and my daughter, I found out she lied to me about just so many different things, and so it. I think that
mm,
that period was brief, but it was very painful, man. Like, am I a
mm,
fraud? Like, oh my God. Like, I thought about all of the shit I had said over the years about having a relationship with kids and then trying to reconcile the irreconcilable, which is a lot of the conversation, many of the conversations I had with my daughter were all fucking lies,
mm.
that she told me. And without, I did, like, I just didn't see it. Like, because some of them were so mundane about the stupidest stuff. So yeah, I mean, like fraud, I guess, imposter, like all of those things. But I mean, in the end, what it's made me realize is I'm just a person, man. I'm just a person. I'm trying to do my best, and life is complicated. And, so I don't have nearly as much of an emotional attachment to that kind of stuff anymore. And I think it's made me a more compassionate person. And I think it's made me a more humble person. And I think it's made me better able to help others. Um, than maybe I was able to before. So yeah.
Do you think, do you think that you were, grieving not only your daughter, but the father you thought yourself to be when the emergency happened?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's our self concept is, I think, can be a really important thing to us. And so, so it was like, if I, if I'm not this person, who am I?
Mhm,
It's actually the same. So interesting in therapy. So I do somatic experiencing therapy, which is really like a body focused therapy. And like one of the things that I mean, literally it's been like the last 3 months, I want to say, or maybe a little, maybe just longer. I've realized that I have a lot of, maybe I don't know how much I have now, but I definitely had a lot of unresolved guilt, and I didn't think that I did. And so I remember being in a somatic experiencing session, and I felt like once I understood that I was carrying all this guilt, um, I remember having this feeling of like it being so. like right there under the surface. It was actually this is gonna sound weird, but it was all like it was almost like a focused in this spot of my forehead, just underneath the skin, and it was so powerful. And I remember thinking to myself, because that's what like somatic experiencing is really all about. And it's like I remember thinking at that moment, like I could release this. It's right there, like it is right there. I didn't want to, and I remember saying that to the therapist, and immediately after, and he said, "Well, what do you think makes it hard for you to want to release that guilt?" And I said, "Because I don't know who I would be without it." And that just like I just kind of blurted that out, and I thought, "Whoa, that's freaking." I went from like not being consciously aware that I was carrying it around, but acting in a way that told me I was carrying it around, but then to realizing that I don't want to let it go, or I didn't want to let it go, because it became this thing, like this. It was like this, I don't know, under the surface driver. Maybe it kept me, maybe punishing myself, you know, kept me connected to my daughter. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure, but like but that I didn't want to let it go in that moment, and I think that's a very similar thing. So, yeah, I don't even know if that answered your question. I just went off on a tangent there.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Did it, at that moment, do you think that guilt, prevented you from doing things, or at least, moving forward towards, healing or getting better?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
for sure, because again, I did not even know I was carrying it around because now I was open to the idea that I might, but I really didn't think that I was because the way I looked at it was like, okay, this is what I would say. Like, I could, it's possible that I could be carrying guilt around, but I think I've worked through it. And I think that I know I did my best. Being a great dad was the most important thing to me, blah, blah, blah. Like, so using logic, which can be
Mm,
important, but it's certainly not the only thing that matters. Um, so, but I really didn't think that I had. You know, but then like some of the things I was doing were a sign that I was still carrying around. So yeah, I don't know. It's amazing uh, how these. What I find amazing is how these there's so much wire like you know imprinted on our nervous system, our psyches that is influencing us that can be really freaking hard to see, man. Because once I realized it, I was like, I remember saying to the therapist, I'm like, I I'm like a personal development junkie. Like I do all this shit. I read all these books. I do all this navel gazing. And it's amazing that I find it amazing that I was carrying this around without even realizing it. And he goes, I mean, he just said the simplest answer. He goes, yeah, well, we all got blind spots, man.
yeah,
You know,
it's
I was like,
I was
yeah,
that's a tender blind spot that, we don't often it's hard for us to see until it gets pointed out either by ourselves or someone else, right?
yeah, absolutely, man.
But
Yeah.
the
So I mean,
fact that you
oh, go
oh,
ahead, go ahead.
so I was gonna say just the fact that you came up with that blind spot up on your own, I think that's impressive.
I didn't come up with it on my own, man. I did not come up
Yeah.
with it on my own. What ended up happening with the guilt thing was so I don't have a great relationship with my brother. I mean, it's complicated, but just
Mm,
put it this way: we're very different people. And he sends me and in the 3.5 years, my dog since my daughter died, up until like this one incident, like maybe 3 months ago or something, he hadn't said a single word to me about my daughter dying. Not like literally not a single word. It's just crazy. But whatever. I mean, and so he said something to me one time where he sends me this message. He's got this very interesting way of communicating. I actually think he might be on the spectrum himself, actually. Like there's a lot of just his inability to, like, his just social, like the way he interacts socially and stuff. It's just very different than me. Let's put it that way. And so, he sends me this message and he goes, I'm, hey, do you ever feel guilty about Cindy and Chloe? Because if you feel more than 0% guilt, I'm 100% sure you're wrong. He tends to talk in these absolutes and
Mhm.
whatever. Like, so, and what happened was I had the m- like the most intense reaction to that. Like, I couldn't like, and I'm a pretty calm person. I could calm down for like 4 hours. I remember talking to my wife, being like, "Oh my god, I don't know what is this about? Like, why am I like so upset about this?" Part of it's our relationship. Part of it's like, you haven't talked to me in 3.5 years, and all of a sudden you don't know anything about my experience, and all of a sudden you're telling me how I should feel. There was all that, but I was also said to her, it could be also that I actually feel guilty, and that it touched that nerve. And so that's what actually caused me to like I had a therapy session like a day or two later, and I talked to my therapist about it. And so, that message that really pissed me off in the moment turned out to be a huge gift, man, because it's actually what led me it's what kind of opened the door for me to walk through to realize that and kind of liberate myself, to the extent that I have right now, but from that feeling of guilt. So in this inadvertent way, my brother uh, gave me a huge gift. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, the phrasing, I don't know your brother, and I don't wanna talk ill of your brother, but I remember the phrasing just seemed jarring. Uh, I was like, it kind of infers that you don't feel guilty. I think everyone feels some sort of I mean, I still feel guilty for, uh, in some ways, Katie's loss, but I know I had nothing. It was out of my hands and out of my control, but still, everyone feels some sort of guilt, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and,
Reading,
like hmm?
sorry, I was going to say I'm reading the comments. Lydia, who has a tell? Me or is it Christopher? What is it? Okay, continue.
Yeah. Um, I was wondering that too. Uh, yeah, for you, it's been, 3 Chloe was your daughter?
Yep.
Been 3.5 years, and how have you managed your guilt? Um, like, and are there and what kind of, um what would you just say to someone, in your shoes or someone like me who carries some sort of guilt on how to better manage, their guilt so that it doesn't, uh, contribute to that the overwhelming and grabbing hold of their nervous system?
I don't know. Honestly, like I don't have any words of advice other than, to share my own experience and what me, and that was, you know, being in a so basically what happened with me is I was in a again, I mean, whenever I say therapy in this call, it's going to be like somatic experiencing therapy. But what ended up happening was mm, one of the one of the things that I regret the most, or one of the biggest mistakes I think that I've made, is when my wife killed herself. My daughters were 6 and 5, and I I first of all, I was a lot younger, and I did not understand the impact of that kind of trauma on a kid. It sounds think about it now, I think just wild that I literally did not understand it, and for a couple of reasons. One, that I had never I had a really good upbringing. I feel very fortunate about that. The older I get, the more fortunate I get, and so I didn't understand trauma, like, really very well at all. And so I didn't understand the impact of childhood trauma. That was number one. Number two, because my wife's mental health issues were so bad for so long, our life was so chaotic and traumatic, and like all of it. It was just, there was part of me at the time that thought, man, if she was never going to be able to get her shit together, maybe things are better this way. They were so chaotic for so long. I don't think that anymore, but I thought that at the time. And then the last thing was I thought I could love them to healing. If I just built a
Mm,
new family, I love them enough, I could love them better, and And so, anyways, so like not putting them in uh, therapy and stuff at the time was like a really like just those ideas that I thought I could love them to healing and stuff. Uh, lo- Loving them is super important, but I mean, I can't love my kids to healing from the death of their mom's suicide. Like, and so I just don't have that kind of power, you know? And
Mhm.
so, so in a therapy session, like when we were talking about this whole guilt thing, so after that thing with my brother, what ended up happening was somehow I found myself like, back there and we're like focusing on what's in the body. And I found myself back in that moment, like when, like after she died and like thinking those thoughts and the most vicious voice, I would say, played out in my head, which was and it was almost like this stuff sounds crazy to say out loud, but it was almost like the voice of the devil in a way, and it was like, "How could you have been so fucking stupid? Like, you fucking idiot," you know? And it was so visceral, and it was like honestly, man, it felt in my body like grabbing a live electrical wire. Like, it
Mhm.
was and that was like me touching the guilt like the core, the fucking guilt for the first time. And it was so intense, man. And I don't know how long it lasted, like maybe 5 or 10 seconds, like 10 seconds at the most, maybe. And then I don't know, it was like that was all I could take of it. Right. And then, and then, but what happened right after that was I had this experience of going back. I went from like this horrible, vicious voice in my head saying, "How can you be so fucking stupid?" and feeling like this electrical shock basically through my body, to then going and seeing that younger guy, that younger version of myself, and almost looking at myself as like another person who was not me and saying, "Dude, look at what you have just been through. You had been through 5 years of your wife being in homeless shelters, of electroshock therapy, psych wards, rehab, like 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 all like spending us to your bankruptcy, anger, physical abuse, like all of it. And you're trying to raise your kids during this time. Like, and dude, you did your best, man. You're doing everything you could just to keep your head above water, you know? And I looked back at that guy, that much younger guy, and I actually felt this sense of compassion for him, for me, that I never had felt before. And even that probably only lasted like 5 or 10 seconds, mm, if I'm guessing, and it was so fucking beautiful. It was so I don't know, beautiful, I guess, is the it was wonderful to and so that was a super long-winded answer of saying, I don't have a magical answer for how you can deal with the guilt that you are so actually to just back up there for a second just before I say this next part, it was incredibly liberating at the same time. And it was the thing that has triggered me actually feeling happy again, like happiness, like I was saying at the beginning before Chloe. That moment was it was so intense and so powerful, both in the confronting part of it, but the compassion part of it at the same time. That I think it was just this, I think, a very pivotal healing moment. I'm not saying I don't have any guilt left. I really have no idea. Maybe it'll come up again. But what I would say is I don't have a magical answer. I don't know what you should do to deal with your guilt other than find a way to face it, whatever that means for you. And and it can be terrifying and incredibly uncomfortable, but I was not dealing with it. It's worse. And if you don't deal with it, it'll never end. Right. So I guess I guess that's what I'd say. I mean, what's your reaction? I'd love to hear your reaction to that incredibly long monologue.
I think what came to mind was I wonder what part of guilt is thinking that you could have controlled outcomes, given the circumstance, given your specific circumstance, right? And I kept thinking back of my situation with Katie in the sense of I had like I remember the day before she went into the ICU, or actually the day she went into the ICU. Um, we were on the phone. She told me she felt sick. I called her around noon. She told me she was in bed all day because she felt terrible. And then she called me around 4:30 to see if I could take her to urgent care. And my response was like literally like I'm about to hit send on an email. I just need 10 minutes. I need to uh, just let Shadow to pee and I'll be on my way. Uh, so like I just need 10 minutes to get her to pee. And Shadow is my dog that I often write about. Ooh. Anyway, she told me, "Oh, no, never mind. I just didn't want to go with my mom. My mom. I'm just gonna go with my mom." I was like, "I'm sure. Like, are you sure? Like literally, like I can be on my way now if you want to go now." Uh, and anyway, I didn't take her, and I still feel uh so guilty about that. Like that would have like if I had gone, like would that have made a difference in the outcome? That because that same day she went into the ICU and spent 3 weeks on a ventilator. Um, but or I feel guilty like I should have done more to try and get her to eat. Um, like, uh, and what I mean by that is she really struggled with anorexia. Um, and since she was like 14, so that was like 30 plus years. And I did a lot to uh, try to get her to eat. Like she would tell me she told me she was a pescatarian, so like a vegetarian that eats fish. So I would like order vegetables on purpose and or fish. I don't eat salads. I'm a meatitarian. Um, and but I mean, I was like, I got to start eating healthy. I'm a fat ass anyway, so you know, why not? And I mean, she would pick off my plate when we'd go out to eat, and maybe I should have done more. But I think that kind of wishful thinking is if I would have done this, if I would have done that, it's kind of like a way of controlling outcomes and uh or that whataboutism of controlling outcomes. And I don't know. I wonder if guilt is that or what is it? Um, but um,
Well,
this
oh,
is
sorry,
why
go ahead.
this is why I write because I get all these ideas in one, and then writing helps me synthesize it more effectively.
Yeah, well, I was just talking to a lady. A lady wrote me a message, or I think a comment. Oh no, I responded to somebody's comment on Substack today, and talking about this exact thing. And and I was talking about I listen to David Kessler podcast. He's like a well known grief guru type dude, and he's got a podcast from a few years ago where he's talking to parents about this exact parents who have lost kids about this exact thing. What if only, everybody's done it to themselves. And what he said, and I really found it enlightening, was that, you know, our minds want to create order, they want to create control. And losing someone that you love dearly is like, I don't know, it's one of the most intense, you know, experiences of lack of control. And so what we do is we go back. So and it's so jarring that what we do is we try to go back and create this illusion of control. Like if I only did this and this would have happened or whatever. Like, and even though no, there's you don't know if you went back and did X that Y would have happened. You have no idea. And so, but it's actually as agonizing as it is to do that, it's actually almost easier or less awful to do that than to just admit how little control we have like we really have in the first place. Because I don't think that you actually, I mean, I shouldn't put words in your mouth, but how much do you actually believe if you had taken her to the hospital, she'd still be alive? Like she had anorexia for like forever.
Actually, she went in for, ended up having, uh, mono and pneumonia, and the only reason why she ended up going into the ICU was her mom is a retired nurse, right? And what she told me was, "Good thing you didn't go with her," because what ended up happening is they gave her some meds to go and said, "Go home, these'll work." And her mom sensed that something was off and asked for an X-ray, uh, and, if the mom didn't push, uh, for it, because she caught some symptoms earlier that day of, like, maybe it's something respiratory, so she advocated for an X-ray. I would have said if I went with her and the nurse person said, "Take these and go home," I would've been like, "Okay, let's go home, Katie," and, she would have never made it to the hospital. So right,
Right.
so yeah, so it wouldn't have changed the outcome, but, I think I feel guilty for at least not showing up, uh, and or, going with her, but, yeah, I know it wouldn't have changed the outcome.
Right,
Um
and so I guess that's, you know what? But I guess, I guess that's the point I was making earlier with that story is, like, logically, I know you shouldn't feel guilty. Like,
Mhm,
logically, you know you shouldn't feel guilty. Like, if you actually that's not enough though, right?
mhm,
And that's, like, I think that's where we really screw ourselves up is, like, logic is important. Like, we like, however, it's limiting, right? Because it's for me, yeah, I mean, I knew all the logical reasons why I shouldn't feel guilt. I even convinced myself that they were true, and they turned out to
mhm.
be false. So, like, for me, it was doing the work to peel back the onion enough to realize that I was full of shit, that I did feel guilty and that I had to face it, that I wasn't gonna be able to logic my way out of it. And for someone is, yeah, grief is pain, guilt is suffering. Yeah. At least I think that's really a really
Mhm.
good way of putting it. So, um, I had to go back and face it head on. And for me, that happened again in somatic experiencing session. However, that works for somebody else's, however that works for them. But like, I think it's been an eye opening experience to me to realize, like, my dad, man, great guy, but from a different generation. I mean, his whole thing is, men are logical, women are emotional. Like, logic is better. You know what I mean? And logic's unpredictable. It's whatever. Or, I mean, emotions are unpredictable. Like, I see obviously how limiting that is. But, I think one of the
Yeah.
biggest experiences that has come, the biggest gifts that has come from this whole experience is my, you know, previously what I thought was like uber logical mind, seeing how freaking limiting that is, man. And realizing that our bodies have vastly more information, they hold vastly more wisdom that our minds ever hoped to. And if you had asked me that even like 2 years ago, I would have said, that sounds like, what are you talking? That sounds like my wife is kind of like a hippie a little bit, like she's on that end of the spectrum. I would have been like, "What do you? That sounds like something my wife would say, man. Like just airy fairy horse shit." But man, I believe it. More like it's. I just realized it. So again, I just think that like I think it's important to realize that you're. It. I mean, maybe you can logic your way out of it. I could not. I don't want to speak. I don't want to speak for you, but I guess maybe the encouragement would be to look beyond logic for healing.
Yeah, it's even I would add to that even to, uh, like, fix your fix your shit, for lack of a better way of putting it. And what I mean by that is, uh, I'm like you. I'm very logical and very methodical.
Mhm,
I think being on the spectrum, it's our way of thinking. It's very concrete and very black and white, and that's helpful
mhm,
in some instances, um, but not all. So I went through. So I got diagnosed with autism on in 2020, right after I bought my first house. Uh, and where things should have, where that label or that diagnosis should have meant something, it became a way to erase me. So what I mean by that is my wife, my then wife, and her mom on almost a daily basis uh, told me I was defective and an embarrassment, and that the world would be better out without me. With the world would be better off without me. So therefore, I should do everybody a favor, right? And I tried to logic my way out of it for years, uh, and um, in terms of like maybe you're just overthinking it, maybe this, maybe that, um, and that silence or that hyper focus on trying to think your way out of it or think your way through it to manage the environment you're in. Like, I didn't realize the emotional toll it took on me till after my second attempt. I was I became so brainwashed that in the sense that the world would be better off without me that I tried twice without really because I much like much like your dad's perspective. I don't be emotional. Men aren't emotional. Men are supposed to be strong. Men are supposed to be this. Men are supposed to be and um so that came from my dad and my cultural context and it nearly without listening to the emotional side of me, I that almost killed me. And at some point I I'm sure you're familiar with the with that DBT model of the emotional brain and your um, logical brain coming together as two converging circles, and I forget what they call the middle piece. Um, but like that's the ideal situation you want to be in, where your emotional brain and your logical brain come together so that you can focus on good solutions that are,
mm,
take both sides of your emotional and your logical side. And maybe that's the better way to work through your stuff. I don't know. But I've been finding it helpful to try and listen to the emotional side. And much like you, that initial reaction was, man, that's some hippie shit. Uh, and but I think that that's been so so helpful in my healing of being more mindful of the emotional side um to just keep moving forward.
mm. So I have a question for you, and the question might be like you're as far as being on the spectrum. I've never talked to another person as much as I've actually talked to you, which tells you how like little I've actually talked to anybody. So and so if this question comes across as completely ignorant or I don't think it'll be insensitive, but just forgive me. Like what but I'm curious and maybe you don't know the answer to this because you only know your own experience, but like I wonder, maybe I'm just wondering, how is it different for you, or if it is different at all, for you to tap into the more emotional side of yourself versus like someone like versus me? Like, I wonder how that is different, or I really have no idea. Maybe you don't know either, but
It, it's certainly a lot harder. Um, uh, I stereotypically people uh, on the autism spectrum uh, have a difficult time with regulating emotions or tapping into or understanding emotions or tapping into their emotions. So, and managing them overall. So
Mm,
it's it's it certainly makes it a lot more difficult to kind of work through it, recognize it, and know how to manage it. It's not as is it doesn't come as intuitively as it would for someone that isn't on the spectrum. Even though that's hard for anyone, irrespective of neurodiversity, it's even harder for someone on the spectrum, I think.
mm, yeah. I find with myself now, I mean, I am like, I'm super emotional, and I don't, I mean like emotional, like, dude, I'll watch like, I never did this before, but I'll watch like, I'll go on this, spend half an hour watching like YouTube shorts of like people being nice to each other, like, and just like be bawling my freaking head off, man. Like, but having said that, I still don't like, or I'm not gonna say I don't like it, but like if I'm crying about my daughter, like sometimes I haven't done this in a while, but and I'm curious what the experience would be like now. But like, there's still a part of me, or at least the last. It's been months since this happened, where I like, took her urn and like, clutched it to my chest and just bawled my head off. There's still even up to the last time, still this voice in my head saying, "You're fucking weak. You cannot protect your family in this state. It's been 3 years, get your shit together." Like, there's that narrative, that internal narrative, I don't listen to it anymore in the sense that I don't let it guide my behavior, where before, im with after my wife's death, I coped with it every which way so I didn't have to hear that voice, so I didn't have to be in that situation, so I don't let it dictate my behavior, but it's, I mean, up I'd be curious how it is now that I've, done some of this work around guilt and stuff, but anyways, 3, 4 months ago, last time that happened, man, it's still super intense, And, so, yeah, I find that interesting, it's just whether it's, how we're socialized or how much of it is biological or whatever, I don't really know, but, I think part of the somatic experiencing work has been able to allow me to create more capacity to be present with whatever is happening without trying to change it, right? So I
Mhm.
spent what's also funny is somatic experiencing has made me realize what the freaking point of meditation is. Like when I was younger, like every time I've tried to meditate, um, you can't change the noise, but you can change your 100%. I think that's a great insight, Lisa. Like I never understood what meditation was about. Like I would try to meditate, and I'd be, my mind would wander after 5 seconds, and I'd beat the shit out of myself up for being a bad meditator and whatever. But like, but so I realize now it's learning to be present with whatever's happening without actually feeling the need to change it. And so, for me, like if that voice is somatic experiencing is given me the capacity or improve my capacity, I still have a long way to go, but to be present with whatever is happening without trying to change it. And that is a freaking superpower, man, because that's the only way you can face the shit you need to face, right? Is this is coming up for me. It is real, like, it might be really intense and uncomfortable and scary, uh, and but I can be here with it, and
Hmm.
I don't know how you can heal otherwise, actually, like, maybe there are ways, but, to me, that's what that's when I think of, like, facing my grief or facing trauma or whatever, it's that. It is
Hmm.
because when you are able to do that and you are able to sit with it, be present with what's happened in your body without making up a story about what it means or anything and not feeling like you need to change it. The insights that you have, the, the things you're able to, I don't even want to say confront. I don't even think it's confronting. Confronting sounds like it's be present with. Like that's how you move through something. It's the ability to walk with it. Mm, That's been
Hmm.
the biggest thing I have learned. Like through this entire experience, that is the biggest thing I've learned, and it will carry me. it makes me better able to deal with anything, any situation that will come up.
And at least you're lucky, you can cry. Um, I I cried for 2 minutes when Katie died,
Mm.
and that was the first time I cried since I could remember. Um, and it's not that I don't feel sadness or anything. I do, and I do feel it intensely, but showing it is always so difficult. Uh, and it's not that I didn't wanna cry. I do, it's just I can't. Uh, so you're lucky. Um,
Well, you know, what I guess what I would say to that is that if it is so hard for you to cry, and you cried even for 2 minutes after you lost Katie, then I think that speaks to how much you loved her. I think that's pretty beautiful. And so, you know, maybe you're lucky that even you had that 2 minutes.
yeah, maybe. Anyway, sorry, I just went back to her wake for a second. Anyway, I'm just wondering, like, you're in while you were talking about meditating and stuff, a question popped into my head about rebuilding. I guess essentially that's what you and I are doing. We're in our own way rebuilding. Uh,
Mm.
and when you look at the person doing the rebuilding, uh, what do you recognize in yourself, and what are you still learning to recognize?
Well, I don't actually think of it as rebuilding. I think of it as adapting, actually. Um, because I don't know, like rebuilding to me means something was destroyed, and I don't want to think about it that way. Like, so I think of life. At least I try to think about it as
Mhm,
life being a constant state of change. And this is a huge change, and I'm adapting. Because again, I just think the words. I try to be really intentional about the words that
mhm.
I use. Sorry, I just want to say, so what was the question again?
Oh, so let me reframe it then. Uh, when you look at the person doing the adapting now,
Mm.
um, what do you recognize, and what are you still learning to recognize as you adapt?
Um, I recognize that okay. I'm recognizing that mm, worry less about things that are outside of my control. You know, I recognize that less fearful, hopelessness, and powerlessness. It's been a big thing, and I think that you know what I'm still adapting to is all of that too. I mean, I think they're the same, actually. You know what I mean. Like, they're not none of it has gone away, um, but you know, and I think yeah, I think I'll be adapting to especially life without my daughter, like just forever. You know, like I mean, so once that answers your question, but a good one, and I think I need to think about it. But maybe before we wrap up, I'll ask that back to you, and we can. We're coming up on an hour, which went by really
Yeah,
quickly for me.
I know. I'm I'm I have something similar to you, in the sense that being where I was a few years ago of having 2 near-death experiences kind of reframed the way I look at things now, at least in and this came up this kind of epiphany came up recently at while I was reflecting on, uh, Katie's passing too, um, is that you gotta let stuff go, and that's one of the things I'm learning to recognize, and the way I'm thinking about that or frame it in my mind about just being more present and being here now, is I've been asking myself the question of, am I going to worry about this on my deathbed?
Mm,
Um, and if the answer is no, it it's been so helpful for me to frame it that way, to kind of like release things.
mm,
And I recognized that I need to find ways to release things, because I I've just been carrying so much, especially in this last 6 years, that I want to move forward towards peace. And I haven't. I want to feel that again, peace. And and
me
so
too.
I'm and part of it is letting stuff go that I have no control of. Like I've stopped trying to figure out why my wife did this to me. You
Mm,
know, it's learning to frame it in such a way as, why did this happen for me?
mhm.
Uh, so then that way, that in, and that's intentional, to your point of framing it that way, because it implies that there's something to learn. There's something to move forward to, whatever that may be. Um, so that is what I'm kind of still learning to recognize as I move forward.
I love it, man. I really appreciate you sharing that. Speaking of releasing, why don't we release these poor people who have been stuck with us for an
Yeah.
hour? And but yeah, maybe just maybe you could just quickly tell everybody watching what you write about and
Oh,
tell them what I'm
uh,
doing.
so I write about a few different pillars. One of them is grief, autism, uh, neurodivergence. My my dog has her own little weekly dispatch. I just read about, like, the absurdity of certain things. As you're healing, in terms of like societal, what you may encounter societally, of like, you know, move on, um, uh, or just different. I poke fun of a lot of societal stereotypes on people struggling with mental health. So that's kind of a, a blanket way of saying what I write about.
So yeah, and I will say I said this in the when I shared this, if any for anybody that saw it, but the way Chris writes makes me feel like I'm in kindergarten. So very eloquent
Oh,
wordsmith, I would say. And for me, write about grief for men and the people who love them. And I actually just like literally today, I sent a note. I created this assessment for guys. It's totally free. There's no strings attached. I'm not trying to sell anything, but it's called the gut check. It's for guys to understand answer like 29 questions and really get a sense of, what are how the patterns of being a fixer, a ghost, the rock or the fuse, as it plays out in their life, plays out in their life. So it's just a tool to help grieving guys who don't understand grief to see, the patterns they're playing out in their life and also the impact that they're having. Because I think self awareness or creating more awareness is a really important first step to any kind of change. So that's at gutcheck.tools. And again, it's totally free. I'm not trying to sell
hmm.
you anything or anything. I'm just trying to help. With
I'm
that
I'm
being
gonna actually.
said, yeah, do it. I would love to actually I would love your feedback. Gutcheck.tools. I literally just went live with it today. So it's still working on it. So any feedback will help me make it better. But Chris, it was great to talk to you, brother. It's just like last time, and I would love to do this again, man, and keep doing the work and keep helping people with your amazing writing.
Thank you. Take it easy. Bye.